All right, hello everyone. I would like to welcome us all to Insight into the Music Therapy Profession. My name is Brianne. I'm one of the co-chairs of the American Music Therapy Association's Workforce Development and Retention Committee. That's a mouthful. Um, but I'm one of the co-chairs of this committee. Jess is our other co-chair. She's there on the Facebook end of things, monitoring the Facebook chat for questions, and she's going to be relaying your questions to our panelists. We have some great panelists lined up for you all today. They're all going to provide a bit of insight into what it is like to be a music therapist. Each panelist is going to have about 9 minutes to present, and we should have about 25 minutes or so at the end of our time together for questions. So to get us started, we're going to start with Dawn. Dawn Thompson is going to speak about her clinical practice. She is a music therapist at Sunshine Music Therapy Incorporated in Albuquerque, New Mexico. All right, Dawn, you can take it away. Thank you.
Hello, thanks, Brianne. I'm Dawn Thompson. Like she said, I am a music therapist in Albuquerque with Sunshine Music Therapy. I'm going to try really hard to speed through the word vomit portion of this presentation because I have some videos that will do a much better job. So Sunshine Music Therapy is a private company in New Mexico, and most of our income comes from contracts with early intervention agencies in town. So early intervention caters to children under the age of 3. My youngest right now is 8 months old, but I have seen kids since the day they were born for some of them, if they're like siblings of kids that I'm seeing. So I've worked with kids all the way from they were fresh all the way to the time that they're 3. We do work as part of a transdisciplinary model, meaning that it's a whole group of providers that are working towards the same goals for these kiddos. So we work on IFSP teams, which is infant family service plan teams. I work with speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, vision specialists, massage therapists, and a whole lot of other people. Right now, early intervention is kind of doing this coaching model kick where it's really parent involved, and they want us to be coaching the parents on how to be implementing these strategies in their daily routines. So that's been a really interesting perspective as well, really making it like a full family experience. And like I said, we all kind of work towards the same goals. And so the interventionists are more strategies towards reaching these goals. So there's not like a music specific goal that only the music therapist is allowed to work on, or a speech goal only the speech therapist is allowed to work on. All of us are helping these kiddos work towards those same goals. So that's the early intervention side. And then for the private pay side, I'd say about a third of my monthly billing is private pay clients that are all clinic based. Those clients range from age 3 to 36, and they also include a few groups that I see at one of the child cares on one of the Indian reservations here in New Mexico. And what's really fun about some of our private clients is a lot of them are kiddos that aged out of early intervention and wanted to stay. So I have a little girl who I started seeing when she was 8 months old, and she will be 5 in March, and it's been really fun to get to kind of continue some of those therapeutic relationships. So my average day right now is I work with kids in the homes for early intervention. I either see them in the homes, or we've been doing a lot of park visits lately, or we'll go to, or I'll see them at their daycare sometimes and work with their teachers as well. Those sessions are 60 minutes a piece. And then I usually see 3 to 4 clients in the afternoons at the clinic, and those visits range from 30, 45, or 60 minutes. I work with kids and adults with varying abilities, autism, trauma, traumatic brain injury. I work with some drug-exposed kiddos, emotional regulation support. I work with plenty with vision impairments and hearing impairments, and a lot with just general developmental delay, just helping them catch up before they get into that public school age. So just a little bit of background about me. I first got into music therapy, not knowing how to do both special education and be Hannah Montana. So I did the whole like best of both worlds thing, and somehow stumbled across music therapy when my mom saw something on Dateline and was like, that looks like Dawn would enjoy that. So I did a big research project as part of a project in high school and opened up this whole new world for me. So I'd say the biggest struggles with music therapy right now has nothing to do with anything we learned in school. It's all about scheduling. It's a nightmare trying to meet, the hourly recommendations we're supposed to do and the service plan agreements we've made, and dealing with cancellations and being at different parts of town at the same time of day. So scheduling is definitely the hardest part that I would say right now. Other things that can be kind of tricky to navigate are changing guidelines from, the people who pay us. So early intervention is all state funded. It's a Medicaid program. And so we are kind of at the mercy of whatever their guidelines are at the time. So there's kind of the swinging pendulum of like, do lots of co-visits with other providers, swinging to have the coaching model where there's one lead provider and the rest of you are only in there once a month. Sometimes they don't. There's just certain things that we're allowed to do and things that they don't want us to do, just depending on kind of the flavor of the month. So a lot of it is just trying to play the game while also sticking to our training. So that can just be kind of tricky things to navigate. I'd say another tricky thing is just dealing and working with families and kids that have experienced trauma. I do work with some kiddos who have suffered significant abuse, and music therapy is one of the things that is helping them recover from some of those traumas, physical and otherwise. I work with a lot of kiddos who have been reunited with their parents after being in the foster system, and so kind of navigating some of those changes as well. But the biggest joys, one of my favorites is just getting to still be creative. I still get to write songs, I still get to learn new things, I still get to make music. And I love that as a music therapist, I haven't had to abandon just being a musician. So I still get to kind of feed into that part of myself as well. I love watching the kids and families grow. And it's so much fun to watch the progress they made. And what I love more than anything is seeing the pride on the kids and the families' faces. I love when, there's a Sunday morning and I suddenly get this text from mom. It's like, look what so-and-so did last night. We've been working on this all week since we last saw you. And here's this great new success that they're doing. And it's so much fun getting to see them have the success. And it's interesting from like a therapeutic perspective, how much the parents suddenly get involved once they see their kids taste that success. For example, I had a visit a couple days ago where, the kid's mostly nonverbal, and I had this fun little sneeze song with scarves, and we're sneezing the scarves off our head. And the mom was just kind of sitting there watching, just waiting for it to happen. And suddenly the kid did achoo, and she got so excited and finally started singing along in the song. And that's what kind of fed him a little bit more too. So, the kid's success is the parents just as much too. And it's a lot of fun to get to see that. There's definitely a lot of bittersweetness when those kids leave, especially with the early intervention kids, because I only get to see them until they're 3, and a lot of them don't, remember you after that, but they remember what they learned from you. I use Pete the Cat. I don't know if anybody here knows Pete the Cat. He's a children's book character holding up like a book. And he sings little songs about his day-to-day stuff and wearing cool shoes and all this sorts of things. And one of my I'm in touch with one of the moms of one of my former clients, and she showed him a video of me singing like a song, or I think a video from when we were working together. And he goes, "Oh, that's Pete the Cat." So he knew me as the Pete the Cat voice, but I actually was Pete the Cat to him. So now onto the videos. Can I ask how much time I have left, Brianne?
You have about 4 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. So I have 2 videos. I have a few videos to show. This first one is of a little girl that I started with when she was 8 months old. She was born with cortical visual impairment, which is a vision impairment that has nothing to do with the eyes. It has to do with how the brain processes visual information. So because of these delays, because of this diagnosis, she did have some speech delays and motor delays. And this is a video of one of the very first times she really vocalized with us. Ding dong, I've got the rhythm in my hands. Ding dong, I've got the rhythm in my hands. Ding dong, got the rhythm in my hands. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Hot dog, hot dog. We do more? More. Good. Ding dong, I've got the rhythm in my hands. Ding dong, I've got the rhythm in my hands. So you guys kind of get the gist of that one. And what was really cool about her is I got to see her until she turned 3. And here's a video of her right before her 3rd birthday. So here we're working on reaching and engagement and counting and kind of some preschool readiness skills here, because she was getting ready to go into preschool. 1, 2, ready? 2 little snowflakes, fluffy and white. Each one chilly, each one bright. Each one different, each one new, just like you. Then one day the shining sun melted snowflakes one by one. Reach, you get it? Reach, 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 reach. Get it. Oh, good job. Almost. One did nothing left behind. How many? 1, One. One little snowflake, fluffy and white. Each one chilly, each one bright. Each one different, each one new. Just like you. And one day. So that was kind of a cool full circle thing, seeing from how far she wasn't even standing on her own in that first video, all the way to being able to count to 3 and getting ready to go to preschool and reaching with both sides, which is a big challenge for her because of the vision impairment. So she was a major success story. So this next little girl, I started seeing her with her foster family who later adopted her. She had significant traumatic brain injury from an abuse incident and was just recovering from that. So here we are working on, pull up the right video so I can see it. We're working on mindful of like intentionally moving her limbs here. And so if you see, she has her feet propped up on a drum and a bell around her left foot because her right one was stronger. So we were trying to get her to lose her left side more intentionally. Get it again. 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 The best part of that video is, of course, the giant belly laugh that you get from this 2-year-old who was just kicking her leg to make a bell go, but it was one of the most rewarding sessions I've had. And then one more and then I'll be done. Here's this little boy who, oh shoot, it's not pulled up. Hang on one second. He was born with cancer and no eyes. So he's obviously had a really, really tough time. I started with him when he was 2 months old, and the biggest thing we were working on was just desensitization he was just so sensitive to every sound. You know, a door would open, a dog would walk by, and he would get so tense. And of course, he would finally loosen up, and then he'd get a chemotherapy treatment or some sort of physical or medical trauma and would tighten up again. So it took him a long time to loosen up. He'll be 3 in January, and one of his biggest goals has been walking. And in this video, this was the very first time he walked with just holding one hand. Otherwise, he would be holding 2 hands on a wagon or needing to be carried, or would have to hold 2 hands at the same time. So we've been kind of practicing gait training and motor planning with just a really simple song with a steady tempo. And this was his first time walking with just one hand being held. And now he's walking on his own as of like a week ago, which is amazing. Let's go, Rambo, let's go. Let's go, Rambo, let's go. Let's go, Rambo, let's go. Go, go, go. Yay! And that one kind of wraps it up nicely. So that's the end of my presentation. I don't know if you wanted to do questions now or all at the end, but I'm done.
Thank you, Dawn. We're going to have questions at the end. So if you guys are watching, I know we have a few watching live on Facebook. So if you think of questions, please, you can leave a comment or there on Facebook. And we will have the panelists answer your question at the end. All right, I think next up, we're going to have Wiley Smith speak to you about his experience. Wiley is a graduate student at Appalachian State University in North Carolina. He's a graduate student in music therapy. So he's going to speak to you about that, how that is for him there at Appalachian State. I'm going to turn it over to Wiley.
Thank you. So I'm Wiley, and like you just heard, I'm a graduate student. So every student and every graduate student's entry into music therapy is a little different, and there's quite a lot of variation. So some of my classmates, they're graduate students, but they haven't practiced music therapy before. They haven't been board certified. But I have been practicing music therapy for about 6 years. So I was board certified in 2015. So I started off, my training was in music education. And I sort of switched gears and added some music therapy training, um, finished my required internship and got my board certification and worked for a few years. And most of my clinical work was with adults in medical settings, so hospitals. I did a lot of different kinds of work, but that was most of what I did. I also worked with kids with autism. I worked in hospice a little bit. And so, but with the medical part, a lot of what I was doing was using music to support people who had hospital stays. And that could be as straightforward as just given a little bit of like a normalizing thing. The hospital is a pretty scary and unusual place. So music is a great outlet for giving something, the outside world and a way to cope with being in the hospital. Sometimes I use music for pain management or anxiety management, or even to address really, really deeper personal or existential things. Like it could be a lot of different things. But as part of that work, I came up against some really had a lot of really amazing experiences, but also experienced some challenges, and realized I was really interested in advanced training or getting a little bit more preparation to work in that setting. I think my heart's really in that medical work, and it's a lot of figure it out on the go kind of stuff. And so just being presented with patients' needs in the moment, I felt like I wanted some more training to be able to have some flexibility. So I looked into graduate school. And so I am currently, this is my third year at Appalachian State University in Boone. And I am in a dual master's degree program for clinical mental health counseling and music therapy. You don't have to have other like counseling or social work training or licensure to be a music therapist, but I found that a lot of my experience with patients in the hospital was a lot of counseling, a lot of talking. Music was really powerful, but there was also a lot of verbal processing. So that's why I decided to get that mental health counseling training as part of it. So my experience in this program, every program's different, but in this program, I have done some advanced classes, especially around using improvisation, musical improvisation, with clients and patients to support their wellness, which wasn't really a big part of my training before, and have also learned obviously a lot about different models of counseling and verbal therapy, but also some advanced theories of music therapy. So the initial training, my experience of the initial training in music therapy was great, but really broad. And so this program is a little bit more specific. And other graduate programs, this is the only one I've done, but I've heard a lot about other programs, and I know some colleagues who have done other things that they might have more of a specific focus on using neurologic music therapy, or using particular ways of using music therapy for children or particular populations. So generally, I think graduate school in music therapy is a little bit more focused. And for me, I have done a little bit of clinical fieldwork in music therapy while I've been here. And part of that has been kind of like also clinical practice. So a little bit like I'm working and getting class credit for it. And so again, every grad program is different. I used to work with some people who were working full time and going to graduate school, which is awesome for them, but it seemed like a little bit too much for me. So that is how I ended up where I am. So taking a look at my notes to see where I am, not get ahead of myself. Um, so, and the other thing is, like, my program, I started in the fall of 2019. I started off in person. My program is still nominally in person. Obviously, everything has been a little different in the last couple of years. But there's a lot of programs that do all the classes online. You do supervision online. Um, but my program is in person. And so having that, just my experience with that is having music shared live has really been a meaningful part of my experience in graduate school. So one particular class that I just wanted to talk about was my advanced clinical improvisation class. So I started that, well, I took it in the spring of 2020. So I started it in person, transitioned to online. So it was this interesting both and experience. But we talked about different theoretical models of how to use musical improvisation to support particular needs. And one of the great things about that class was, especially early on, we would talk about these theories and it was very like cerebral and like wordy. And then we would like move the tables and chairs aside and get out instruments and like do it. And uh, the experience of doing it and learning, experiential learning was so different and so like such an aha moment. And I think that's one of the big things overall about my experience with music therapy is we're so excited about it as music therapists and we try to talk about it and explain it, but there's no good way to explain it. You just have to like do it. It's kind of like if you explain what it's like to be a singer in a choir and like what that feels like, or to be a member of a band. It's just like you just kind of have to experience it. So it's very humbling just to recognize like some theories that it was like, I don't know, this sounds like sounds like a bunch of hooey. And then like doing it, I was like, man, this is awesome. I really see why this is a thing. Um, that was a really neat experience for me. And so this is my last semester of fieldwork and classes in the spring. All I have left is my thesis. A lot of graduate programs require or emphasize research, but not all. And I think a lot of the emphasis in just master's level, this is a master's level program I'm in, is in like sort of preparing to do research. And I've heard people say like master's grad school is like learning to do research a little bit, and then PhD is like PhD is like actually doing it, like taking it to the next step. So I am working on getting that thesis in place for the spring. And I dropped my notes, but I'm gonna check them again. One other thing I wanted to add is, like I said, everybody's experience in graduate school is different. Some people don't have any experience as music therapists before they do graduate school. But for me, I really appreciated getting my initial music therapy training out of the way, having some clinical practice, and then coming back. Because I feel like my clinical experience is really informing what I'm learning and taking from the graduate program now. So there's my 2 bits. I look forward to, I'm not really sure how I'm doing on time. How am I doing on time, man? Great. Okay. Um, that's all I have to say about that. And I look forward to hearing your questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Wiley. That was like perfect on time. Our next speaker is going to be Shanna Eagle. She is a music therapist at Spectrum Creative Arts in Rochester, New York, and she's going to talk to you about her clinical practice in music therapy. So here is Shay.
Hi, everyone. So as Brianne mentioned, my name is Shanna Eagle. My pronouns are she, her. I'm currently living in Rochester, New York, where I work as a music therapist at Spectrum Creative Arts. Spectrum is an inclusive arts education and therapy facility. So I work primarily with adults and adolescents with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but that certainly is not the only thing I do at Spectrum. I have been exposed to lots of different experiences, which is really awesome. I am a newer professional. I've only been board certified for just over a year now, so I still have a lot of things to learn and experience. I'm also the current Mid-Atlantic region PR chair, so the Mid-Atlantic region of the American Music Therapy Association. I'm the public relations chair. So I've gotten to be very involved in like the inner workings of the field, as well as getting to see some of my clinical experience. So before I get into what it is I do at Spectrum, I want to go back just a little bit to briefly kind of talk about how I got into music therapy. So I was the music kid in my school. You know, I was the one that was always in the band room, always in the chorus room, in all the shows. So everybody just kind of assumed I was going to end up in music education. But honestly, the idea of like going into a classroom and leading a music class was just absolutely horrific to me. I knew I was never going to be in music education. I couldn't do that. So up until my junior year of high school, I was like, okay, I guess I'll go into something like linguistics. I don't know. I didn't know what I was going to do with that, but that was where my path was at the time. And then I had an assignment in like a health class, and I had to do a project on a health-related career, and I ended up stumbling on music therapy. And from that point on, I was set. Music therapy was where I was going to go. So that's kind of how I found music therapy. I attended SUNY Fredonia in New York for my undergraduate degree. And the best part of my undergraduate experience was all of the clinical placements that I got to do. I was really fortunate. I got to do one clinical placement in a memory care unit, one in a hospice, which was absolutely life-changing, one in an occupational training center, and I got to do a lot of observations at a psychiatric center as well. So I've had a lot of experience just from my undergraduate degree itself. And in order to graduate with my bachelor's degree, I had to complete the internship. My internship was 8 months long, and it's actually where I ended up getting hired. So I got hired right out of my internship at the same site at Spectrum. And my internship started in January 2020. So the first 3 months of it were all in person. Everything was going great. And then March 18th, everything got shut down. And I ended up having to complete the remaining 5 months of my internship and the first several months of my career at Spectrum completely virtually. So that was a very different experience from everything that I had been studying and learning, and just the experience of beginning a career in the middle of a global pandemic is a very jarring experience, but it's definitely allowed me to see some different parts of like the inner workings of a business that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. So at Spectrum, I am actually really fortunate because the Spectrum staff is a very large team of music therapists and art therapists, and that's not very typical. I know a lot of music therapists tend to be like one, if they're not the only one at their facility, they're one of a couple of the people at their facility. So I was really, really fortunate to have like a very large support system of other music therapists and art therapists that I got to work with. Spectrum is more of a community-based program, so we do a little bit of everything. I have some coworkers who are doing all of their school-based work with IEPs, all of those students. I have some who are working in nursing homes in the community. I have some experience with leading we've been contracted at some different community programs to do like Jewish holiday celebrations where we created an entire like skit for the celebration. So we do a little bit of everything, but I personally am mostly clinic-based. And in my clinic work, I have a little bit of a lot of things. So I have some clients who came to Spectrum with a music goal in mind. They want to learn how to play an instrument, and that is that is the goal that they want. So I do a lot of like adapted lessons, and adapted lessons are really interesting because you are taking like what people know as like a standard way to play an instrument, and you are just adapting it to whatever needs of that individual person are. So it could be adapting the notation style, it could be adapting the instrument itself, it could be even doing like an adapted tuning on guitar. I also have a lot of clients who I see for like some of the more common music therapy goals, like speech related things, fine and gross motor skills, and like emotional support things. And it's just a very interesting intersection between finding that line between like what's an adapted lesson, what's a music therapy session. I have one client who I see, her goal is to learn, like she wants to learn how to play the flute and she wants to play it for performances, but she also has a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and a couple of other diagnoses as well. And we use her flute lessons to be to learn and explore some different things like mindfulness techniques, grounding techniques, breathing techniques. And she's still learning how to play the flute, but she's using the same techniques to play the flute to help ground her in other experiences that she can have in day-to-day life. So there's a really interesting cross-section for the things that I get to do. It's a very didactic approach. I also am currently teaching or leading a theater class, and it's completely happening online right now. So all of the clients in that class get to write and perform original shows with original songs, and they have a blast. For the past year, I've been running a guitar class, which is also happening completely online, and I had 5 students in the class, and each one of them had a different adapted tuning on their guitar. So it was just a really, really interesting experience to kind of work with how to put them all together, not only having it happen in an online platform, but also have it work with all of their adapted tunings. And it's been a definitely an interesting time. Some of the more difficult things that I've noticed in my career so far, in my early amount of career, I have to do a lot of original content. And I've always prided myself on being like the really creative person. I love being creative, but it can be really difficult to try and keep up with it and maintain all of that creativity, bringing it into so many different sessions and so many different settings. So that is kind of one of the struggles that I've had so far. And I've also had to constantly advocate for the field. Luckily not in my workplace itself, because I work with so many other music therapists, but just outside of my workplace, I have so many times where I tell someone I'm a music therapist and they say, what's that? So do you just play guitar and sing for people? And there's so much more to that. Some of my favorite parts about being a music therapist, I get to work with such a wide range of people, both other professionals and my clientele. I have such a wide range of people that I get to experience and like grow with. And my absolute favorite part of being a music therapist is when my clients come in and they tell me that they've noticed like a huge difference in something. I had one client recently saying that they noticed a huge improvement in their speech from the past like 2 years from when they started taking sessions at Spectrum. I have one student who we do like really, really in-depth songwriting things, and they requested to have like an extended session or see it more times a week because they just think it's so beneficial for them. So those are some of like those really feel good moments that we all love as music therapists and we all look forward to all the time. And I think that's all I have, and I think that's about all my time too.
Yeah, again, perfect with the timing. So thank you so much, Shay, for sharing that with us. We have one more panelist for you guys today. Her name is Hannah. She is an undergraduate student at West Texas A&M University, and she is going to speak to you all about her experience as a music therapy student. So take it away, Hannah.
Cool deal. Hi, everyone. So, like they said, my name is Hannah Romo. I am a senior at West Texas A&M University. And yeah, it's still weird to say. I'm still getting used to all of that. But I guess like everyone else, how I got into music therapy was actually by a stroke of chance. I was actually planning to go to college for early education. And I had like during high school, I had like an internship and everything. I was working in elementary schools daily and I loved it. And then just suddenly out of the blue, I started getting introduced to music therapy through people that I know at church who used to be music therapists, and just overall I would start seeing them pop up. And then WT actually offered a career day for music majors, and music therapy was one of them. And I was like, what the heck, I'll go and I'll check it out. And I met my professor, Dr. Kaler, and it's kind of been, I was sold from there on. And ever since I joined last minute, like very last minute, I really haven't looked back. It's been such a wonderful experience, and I want to share that with you. Of course, this is my experience at WT, but it can also be different from school to school. This is just my personal experience. So for the first, I would say 2 years or 4 semesters, it's basically like your introduction. Like your first semester is like your introduction to music therapy, and like what with a history of it, what it is, and all that fun stuff. And then we get into like more like specifics, like how could you use music therapy and things like that, more technique based. And at the same time, while you're taking those therapy classes, you're also introduced into the rest of the music curriculum, which is your music theory classes, your aural skill or your ear listening classes, your basic piano classes, and eventually you also get into like your guitar classes, which sounds like a lot, but they do a really good job here of like kind of dipping your foot in and then slowly but surely getting you more involved with the process throughout the through the first 2 years. And then for us at the end of our our sophomore fall semester, we have a thing called an entrance exam, and ours was having a whole bunch of songs prepared in different keys on different instruments between the auto harp, the guitar, and the piano, and we had to play in front of our professor as well as other music therapists. And this was basically our barrier exam to determine if we were ready to be thrown out into the wonderful world of Practicum, which is basically where you go and start getting your clinical hours at different locations with different practicing music therapists. So far, I have had practicum at a nursing home. I have had private practice. I had multiple private practice because I also got to experience doing music therapy and doing classes and doing practicums during a pandemic. And I mean, they teach you a lot in school, but they don't teach you how to learn during the pandemic. And funny enough that I actually had one of my practicums with Dawn. So that was very fun. I got to know her through that and learned all the Pete the Cat books. I still use Pete the Cat. So very useful. But yeah, it's definitely a different take on seeing how it's done in person versus on telehealth and through a screen and through Zoom, and trying to make sure your client is achieving their goals and things like that. So I had telehealth. I was in a psychiatric facility this past semester. And then currently I am in the education system, and I am working with children who are hard of hearing. And I will have 1 semester of practicum left, and then I will have an internship, which I'm applying for right now. So that's always fun. But going back to practicum, I would probably say it's the best thing ever. I mean, it gets you so like involved in like what you're going to be doing. Of course, like you have the fun moments of like, yeah, I get to work with like people and like really use what I learn and put it into practice, but you also get to learn all the fun stuff, including paperwork. So much paperwork, all the documentation, all the data collection. And you really get to learn like the importance of that and just how like it really affects like what you will be doing in the future and all that kind of stuff. Oh, I was gonna say, always during like sometime in your practicum, you'll have your aha moment of like, oh, this is why I'm doing this. Cause you know, it's hard in college because you're like, am I really doing the right thing? Am I really doing what I need to do? Do I really need to do this? Should I change? Mine was definitely just sitting with my client who was a autistic male, sorry. And he was just learning how to spell his name. And I remember I was just like, I don't know if I could do this. Like, I've been trying for weeks and it's just, I'm not doing well. I don't feel confident myself. But one day I just sat down and we worked on it for a 30-minute session. And at the end of the session, he was able to do it by himself. And I was like, oh, it worked. I did it. I did this correctly. Like, I did what I was supposed to do. Like, everything started to click. And ever since then, like, he was able to independently spell his name out. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I did that. So it's definitely one of my yeah, I belong here, like, kind of moments. Let's see. What's also nice about the curriculum is that it's very focused on different populations and how we can use it, like within like populations we might not expect. Of course, we expect like autism, intellectual disabilities, the elderly, people with Parkinson's, all that kind of stuff. But we also go into like the nitty gritty of, have you ever thought about this population? Like, nothing goes unnoticed, I feel, in how our curriculum is structured. Also, I will say that the curriculum itself is very rigorous. It's not just a simple walk in the park. But I will say that because of how it's structured and how much we are like tested and how much like material and things get thrown at us constantly, I'm so excited to like really see what I've learned and put it out in practice, because I feel definitely prepared. Like, I don't feel scared for my internship. I don't feel scared that I'm not going to do well. I know I'm going to do well. I just have to find one first, which is the fun part. But first, I would have a couple suggestions if you're wanting to go into music therapy in college, is that, really do your research. Research is always important. Even when you go into music therapy, you'll still find out research is very important. But just really doing your research on like what schools around you offer music therapy, because there's not a whole lot, at least in my area, that did. I was very lucky that WT was right near where I lived. So, but yeah, so just doing research, reaching out to the professors, being able to like go on campus and like look around and all that kind of stuff, that's also very helpful. And also, just if you can, like, pick up the guitar and maybe teach yourself, or go take basic lessons, or go take basic piano lessons. That will definitely help you with becoming way more comfortable on those instruments, because you're going to use those way more than you might think. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I think I went over all my points. Yeah.
I can't unmute. All right. I was
Okay.
having trouble unmuting myself.
No, you're good.
In one of those days. Thank you, Hannah, so much for your comments. I think I just want to echo a couple of things of what you were talking about as far as educational requirements for music therapists, just in case anyone watching has any questions. So you can get an undergraduate degree, a master's degree, and a PhD in music therapy. All of those degree options are available. It is a degree program. So Hannah, one of my favorite things that Hannah said was that Practicum was the best thing ever. That's so encouraging to hear. So as part of your either undergraduate work or, and Wiley touched on this as well. So if you don't have an undergraduate degree in music therapy and you're looking to get a master's degree in music therapy, if you have a music degree or something very close, you would need to at least have a music minor in order to do an equivalency degree. We can get either just an equivalency degree to make up for those undergraduate classes that you missed, or you can also do a master's equivalency. So I actually did a master's equivalency at the University of Miami. I had an undergraduate degree in psychology and a minor in music. I was a double major in music and psychology and music performance, but I dropped my music major. I think like my last semester of school, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. But I saw the light, made my way back to the music profession eventually. But because I almost had a degree in music, I was pretty what's the word? It wasn't a challenge to get that those undergraduate requirements for me. And then to go on and get a master's degree in music therapy. So you'll have practicum experiences like Hannah talked about. And then after you've completed your coursework, you're going to have to complete an internship. So Anna touched on that as well. So at the end of all of your coursework, you have to do a 6-month internship to have a certain number of clinical training hours. So you have to have enough in-person clinical experience before you're eligible to sit for the board certification exam. So in order to call yourself a music therapist, you have to pass a national board certification exam at the end of your internship. So you've done all of your coursework, you've done your internship, and now you're eligible to sit for this board certification exam. You take the exam, you pass, and you become a music therapist. You can start calling yourself a music therapist and working professionally. So that's kind of the arc of how you become a music therapist, and I would like to thank Hannah and Wiley for touching on that. We do have a couple of questions. I would say, please, if you're watching, make sure you're putting the questions for us in those comments, and Jess is gonna relay them to us. So one question, since this is what we're talking about, there was an equivalency question. Has anyone on the panel participated in an equivalency program or connected with professionals who have? So, like I just said, I have. I did a master's equivalency at the University of Miami, and I've been working as a music therapist for the past 14 years. Has anyone else?
I have. I actually got my start with a bachelor's level equivalency. I got a degree in music education in North Carolina, and then long story short, moved to Cleveland, Ohio, and ended up getting equivalency at Cleveland State University. It was like a 2-ish year program. I don't remember how long it was. And I studied music. I had a music degree, so I just had the music therapy class requirements and fieldwork.
Awesome. Thank you, Wiley. We have another question from Stella. And Stella says, adaptive lessons are interesting to me. We build instruments and are interested in producing adapted instruments for music therapy. Where would I find more info on what therapists or clients would need? So I'm gonna answer that, and whoever else wants to jump in can as well on the panel. You can reach out to the American Music Therapy Association and voice that you are interested in developing adapted instruments for music therapists. You can find information on the American Music Therapy Association's website. If I'm gonna actually drop my email, the email that Jess and I share for the Workforce Development and Retention Committee, in the chat. And if all the panelists, if you guys wouldn't mind sharing your emails in case people have follow-up questions, if you could just put your name and your email address, so Jess can copy and paste that to the Facebook group. So if someone has specific questions, they can contact you. But I also work with individuals who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, and I purchase a lot of adaptive equipment, and I also adapt instruments in order to make them more functional for my clients. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me at that email address, and I would love to be a resource for you. Does anybody else have any comments on adaptive instruments?
Yeah, I think just like what Brienne was just saying, reaching out to any like practice that does offer adapted lessons would be a great resource, because I know it does get very specific. I know I have different things for each of the clients that I work with, so it gets very specific, and we're always thinking of like, oh, what if this existed? That would be great, but none of us have the know-how to make it. So absolutely reaching out. You can reach out to me as well. I'm sure Spectrum would be a great resource to help out with that too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like it gets very specific. Like we're working with individuals, and every individual has like very specialized needs. So, yeah, it can be it can be challenging, but it's also really rewarding when you're able to figure out something that works. So, thank you, Stella, for that. All right, let me scroll back through this chat because I think I'm missing questions. All right, here is a question. It says, interested in knowing if and how music therapists have worked with other practitioners, such as therapeutic music practitioners or music I can't even read that word, thanatologist. If so, how do you communicate your respective professions with healthcare providers? Does anybody have experience with that on the panel? I think Jess said that she can touch on that if needed. I don't have experience with that personally.
Yes, I can speak to that. Hi, I'm Jess Fletcher. I'm a music therapist, board certified music therapist, and I work for a private practice, and I also teach for a local university. And this is a great and very insightful question. So yes, I have had experiences working more so with music volunteers. I do live in a rural area, so access to music therapy in general is a challenge sometimes with that financial piece, which I think plays into this a little bit. So the way I have or we've worked with other music, therapeutic music professionals and volunteers has really been trying to look at it from a very community and holistic based perspective with a couple of different important goals. One is mitigating harm for our clients, and then also really focusing in on what are the client's needs. Because, there's some individuals that may really need that in-depth clinical goals as a part of their intensive treatment, whereas others, might benefit from more relaxation music listening. So we really try to look at what are the levels of care needed, kind of very much like, someone might be seeking mental health support in a more inpatient intensive need. Others might need more of an outpatient, and, sometimes talk space might be the mental health support that is best for you. So we really look at that of what are the levels of care, as well as what are the scopes of practice of each individual as well, and how can we best use both of our scopes of practice and our clinical knowledge and their knowledge as well to serve the needs of everyone within those facilities and spaces. So hopefully that helped and was somewhat clear.
Yeah, thank you, Jess. Can you also just talk a little bit about how you have hospitals understand the value of the profession in order to fund music therapists versus using volunteers to provide?
Yes. Again, bringing it back to the rural area, it does sometimes come down to the dollar, something that we don't necessarily want to have to associate with care, especially creative care and music therapy specifically. So we kind of use that. We rely on our music therapy research and our strengths as clinicians and researchers to say, here is how we can really benefit the clients that we're serving. We sometimes go to that that dollar number and look to the evidence speaking to how music and especially music therapy can help decrease, pain medication, can decrease costs in other areas, and can be, supportive in a different way, in a more holistic way. So we'll often try to look at that cost effectiveness of, here's how a music volunteer can benefit a program. And then here are situations where specifically that music therapist knowledge might be needed. And sometimes that actually has been helpful and supportive of us to show how we want to work together with others, saying, hey, we recognize that a music therapist might not be best in every single situation, depending on those levels of care, but here's where we really can focus on, the high need, the core need. And then here are these other spaces maybe where a music volunteer could be supportive or helpful. So kind of working with them and showing, here's how you can kind of use music in the most effective way at all levels, sometimes makes those providers happy.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess. We'll let Jess pop back over to Facebook to see if we have any more questions. And Jess is also going to copy our email addresses and post those on Facebook. So if anyone has questions for us specifically or directly, you have our email addresses there. All right, we have like a few more minutes. How should we wrap up our time? Maybe if we don't have any more questions, or until we wait to see if we have another question, maybe everyone can just give a little bit about why they love being a music therapist or being a music therapy student. Whoever can unmute and go for it. Why do you love being a music therapist, or why do you love being a music therapy student?
Looks like there's actually a question in the chat that Jessica just put in.
There is. I'm in my first semester and wondering if you have any tips for time management and balancing when in school. Advice you'd give your first year self. We can let Hannah take that.
Heck yeah. So definitely what I would give advice to my first year self would be get a planner, because that is your life savior. And just writing out my day usually helped me, just even if it was hour to hour, just so I can really see like, okay, I need to do this or need to do this. And also I would also tell myself that it's okay to say no to things. It's okay to say no to like doing things and taking care of what you need to take care of and all that. But yeah, time management is hard, especially during your first year, because you're still trying to figure everything out. And so definitely just whatever way that you can like work with time management, whether it's like getting yourself a checklist, like highlighting what you need to get done, like getting yourself a planner and just really planning day to day of being like, this is what needs to get done, and really just kind of building that. Because if you have a good time management that you can build early on, it'll help you in the future. That is something I wish I built earlier on, but I've started working on it recently, and it's helped in the long run. So that's a good question, though. It's really hard, so I understand your struggles.
Can I just add on to that too? I feel like something that's super important, not just for schooling, but also as you move forward with your career, is learning how to prioritize, knowing what things are the most important to get done, and what things they can get done, but they don't necessarily need to get done. Like Hannah said, it's okay to say no to some things. Don't overcommit yourself in any way, because it's not gonna benefit anybody if you're stretched too thin. So definitely learn to prioritize what's most important to you, what you're gaining the most from your classes as well.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We do have one more panelist with us. Vienna Sa is here. She is going to talk about the education of a music therapist a little more in depth. She is a professor at the University of the Pacific in California. But before Vienna gives her presentation, I just want to let everybody give their most favorite thing about being a music therapist or music therapy student really quickly, and then we'll let Vienna wrap us up. So go. Most music. Come on, favorite.
I'll start. I think my favorite thing about being a music therapist is getting to see how impactful music can be on things that you may not have even considered initially. Just like bringing in, like, even if it's just bringing in a song that you're like, yeah, maybe my client will like this, and then the client just goes over the moon for something that you brought in. Just seeing how much weight and how impactful that music and the elements of music can be. I think that's my favorite part.
I love when music can be kind of that first domino in development, when, you know, families and people are trying so many strategies to get this one thing started, and then music finally gets it, and then everything else falls into place. It's really cool when you get to see that.
I think my favorite thing is just seeing how music can connect people, and I'll keep it at that.
I think my favorite thing as a music therapy student is seeing how we grow and develop all these skills needed to be outside the field, and really seeing us come up with our own philosophies and our own approaches to music therapy. And yeah, that's probably my favorite part.
All right, thank you all so much. I am going to turn it over to Professor Vienna Sa, and she is going to close us out in our presentation.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, I'm going to share the screen. Can everyone see this? Okay, fantastic. Okay, awesome. So I'll talk a little bit about what we need to do to actually become a music therapist, what classes we need to take, how many hours we need, all the kind of boring stuff, but necessary stuff, right? Okay. So thank you for the introduction, Brienne. I do teach over at the University of the Pacific. I also teach psychology courses over at Delta College too. All right. So I'm sure that we discussed what music therapy is. Quick nod from the panelists. Okay, awesome. So just real quickly, this is the definition from AMTA: clinical and evidence-based music interventions while addressing certain goals and objectives. So we're not just playing music randomly, making people feel better, right? We have specific goals that we're addressing, making sure that we're going to try to improve or decrease certain symptoms, right? Okay, good. So music therapy is essentially the music and the relationship put together, just like how the other panelists have mentioned very much about like the relationship building, the rapport, right? It really is integral in music therapy. So we work in a variety of places. I think this was also discussed by one of the panelists. I'll just list them up here. And just to give us a little bit overview really quickly of AMTA's average salary, as well as clinical populations we most frequently serve. Chances are most of us on this panel have addressed many or some of these populations, right? Okay, let's jump right into it. All right, so when we're studying to become a music therapist, and when you're a music therapy student, you start off with, and this can change depending, we can talk about that later, but typically we start off with a 4-year degree, right, in music therapy. Then we jump into a 6-month internship to make sure that the skills you learned in your degree applies and you're practicing those skills on the daily, right? Or very frequently in the week, 6-month internship. And that happens often with other professionals, right? Like other counselors, like other health professionals. This is very common. And then we take the infamous board certification exam, right? So you don't have to pass it on the first try. And very often, many of us take it several times to pass it. But once you take the exam, you get the credential MTBC, which you might see on many of music therapists, let's say LinkedIn or their name, and it's right tacked on in the back. And then you can call yourself a music therapist. Okay, so if we look at the education really consists of these 4 types of classes. We have your music classes, we have your specific music therapy core classes, general ed classes, and then natural and behavioral science. So jumping into the education piece, we typically need, and this is just at my university, but this also applies to many, many other universities because APA dictates this, right? 16 units of music theory, 9 units of music history, 8 units of applied instruction. So for instance, you can actually come in as an instrumentalist that's not in guitar or piano or vocalist. I've actually had many students come in as, let's say, an oboist or a harpist, right? So you do not have to have necessarily training already in guitar, piano, or voice. As long as you have training in one music area, you'll be able to work on being a music therapy student and a music therapist. You need 8 units of ensemble performance. So that could be small group, that could be large group. So that might look like orchestra. That might look like chamber ensemble, right? And then conducting courses, percussion, voice, guitar, and piano. So if you do not already know voice, guitar, or piano, you'll be taking these classes. And that's okay. Okay, education. So in the education section still, but in natural and behavioral science, we have human anatomy, physiology, abnormal psychology is really important, exceptional children, and then electives in sports medicine and physical therapy if you wanted to, speech pathology. For instance, me, I often co-treat in the speech clinic, right? So speech pathology courses was something that I was interested in. Special education courses and psychology courses. Looking into gen eds. Sometimes what you can do also is do your gen eds somewhere else, right? And then you can also transfer in. A lot of our music therapists transfer into the program, and that's totally fine too. So if we look at gen eds, individual interpersonal behavior, non-Western world and society, literature, letters and language, life sciences, mathematics, human concerns. And then the special music therapy courses, which I enjoy the most. I primarily teach the research methods portion of it. I've taught assessment and evaluation. I love psychology of music, and I've taught methods of children and methods with adults. And then fieldwork. Fieldwork is super important because when you're generally, it differs a little bit between different programs, but at certain programs, you start fieldwork in your sophomore year. In certain programs, you start it in your junior year. So fieldwork is essentially where once or twice a week, right, you'll go in to your specific site. So let's say it's like a school you're doing your fieldwork in, or a hospital, right? So you'll go in and you'll actually work with real clients. So just like these wonderful case studies and these stories from the panelists about bonding with their clients and about these experiences that really solidify why we do what we do, right? This is the beginning of it. I always tell my students, like, field work, that is it. This is what it's going to look like out there in the field, right? This is when you know, is this what I want to do, right? Okay. So this is just, oh, I accidentally clicked it. These are a variety of different fieldwork sites specifically at the place I teach at, University of the Pacific. So this is like an elementary school. You can also work in hospice for field work. You can look at acute psych. St. Joe's Medical Center, a hospital, is really, really popular. And here's a little video. If you want to, we could share that if you're interested in seeing what that looks like. And then after you complete your 4 year of courses, or depending on if you transfer in, you know, those years can fluctuate, you'll jump into a 6-month internship. Very exciting. So this is an AMTA approved training site. So it could be a medical setting, it could be a mental health facility, it can be a special education setting. For all of us who are MTBC, who are music therapists, we all have to have gone through internship, right? So for me in particular, I went through a special education setting, but other people might have gone through different ones. And for the panel, we can actually, if you want to share, what type of internship we've gone through.
I did special education as well. I was in the school system for my internship.
Thank you, Brianna.
Mine was special education as well. I was at a private school for children with autism.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was also kind of like a special education setting, more clinic based rather than in a schools though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead, Hannah.
I actually have not had my internship yet. I'm still a student and I'm actually applying for internships right now.
Woo! How exciting.
Yes.
I feel like I should jump in for variety to say that my internship was acute psychiatric care and children's hospital.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, I was like, wow, we're all special ed. Go ahead, Wiley. Yeah.
Yeah, mine was in a hospital, University Hospitals of Cleveland. So a little more variety there.
Very cool. We love to see it. So we got acute psych, we got mental health on our panel, and we got a lot of special ed, which is great. Okay, so yes, so we go through a 6-month internship essentially, where you're placed at a site that you're accepted at. So as Hannah was saying, now she's in the process of applying, right? So this needs to be supervised by a board certified music therapist. Chances are many of us had multiple supervisors, and that's a very common thing too, to sort of get differences in supervision and in styles of music therapy. And it's very similar to full-time employment. For me, mine was not 6 months, mine was actually 10 months. So I did 4 days out of the 5 days a week, and it was extended to 10 months. But it's very common to have a 6 month. So that's, you're going in every single day, or however you have it split up in the week. Okay, great. These are a couple of the ones on the West Coast. That's where I am. And then the board certification exam, exciting stuff. So once you complete your internship and the coursework beforehand, because you can't apply to your internship without completing your coursework, once you complete the internship, you're now eligible to sit for the exam. So like I said before, completing coursework and a completion of the 6-month internship. And you're not allowed to use the MTBC until you have passed, right? And then once you're passed, you did it. Your hard work is done. You're a music therapist. I remember that when I was board certified and I officially passed the test, I felt like, wow, the marathon is done. I finally got my MTBC. But yes, so that's how that works. And then, yes, Jessica, I'm looking at the chat now. A suggestion to mention that UA internships also exist. That's right. So what that means is when we go into the internship section here, you don't have to do an AMTA approved training site. Well, they still need to be AMTA approved, but there's also university affiliated internship sites. And what that means is on the big, how you find internships is you go on the big AMTA website and you click a link and you can see a list of all the AMTA approved sites that you can apply to. However, you can also apply to certain sites that are affiliated to certain universities. So for our university, University of the Pacific, and I'm sure that Jessica can also share some of the university affiliated internship sites also that maybe she has experience with. But for us, we had CHLA, and CHLA is not necessarily, wait, was it CHLA or is it UC? It was Children's Health. I think it was CHLA. Correct me if I'm wrong, but for instance, like one of the sites is CHLA, which is university affiliated to University Pacific, but however, it's not listed on the big AMTA approved training site. So sometimes the university you go to might suggest that, hey, look at, a list of university affiliated internship sites. That's good. Jessica, did you want to share a little bit more about that too?
Oh, I was just popping on since my name was mentioned that, yeah, the private practice where I work, Central Ohio Music Therapy, we were formerly a university affiliated internship, and we did that for, I think, 5 or 6 years before becoming national roster. So they are really neat and do exist. So do check them out because there can be some unique, I think that's where it came from, is someone saying that they had a friend that was just really interested, I'm guessing, in working in corrections or with women, because they set up an internship, a university affiliated internship at a women's prison, which sounds like a fantastic site to me. So,
amazing.
Yeah, creative, so many creative opportunities out there.
Yes, definitely. And I love that you bring that up, because there are some times where you know exactly what type of population you want to work with. However, right, there might not be one around, or you might not be willing to move for it because of financial reasons, right? So you might go off and see if there is somebody around you who might want to become university affiliated and therefore also AMTA approved. So I like that Brianne also mentioned that, right? So if you wanted, you could go off like Jessica's friend, right, and sort of find something that works. Okay. Anything else that y'all want to mention about internship and the experiences?
I think we are running short on time, Vienna.
It's good to know. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Let's keep moving forward. And boom, we're done. Thank you for listening. I don't know if we have any time for questions, Brianne and Jessica.
We were answering questions before. Jessica, are there any additional questions in the chat that we can get to really quickly?
There's not any that I see yet. This could be maybe the last call if there's any burning questions. I know there's about a 10-second delay to the Facebook chat.
While we're waiting on the Facebook delay, I just want to thank all of the panelists. Again, thank you so much for spending a little bit of your Saturday afternoon telling people about music therapy and why you love being a music therapist and a music therapy student. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Vienna, for this amazing presentation. It was very informative. This will live on Facebook on the AMTA National Conference page for as long as they leave it there. I think things live on Facebook for forever. So this resource is going to be available to share and to help educate those that are looking to learn more about becoming a music therapist. Just, are there any other questions?
No, I think we must have done it. There's some thank yous for all the info. We thank you that stuck with us and watched today. Remember that I believe the chat also will exist and is saved, so all the emails and contact is in there. So if you do have any questions later, or you're watching this at a later time, there's both the panelists' email info as well as our general WDR, Workforce Development Retention Committee, AMTA email, which is easy to reach us to. So yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.